Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America, we bring the resource to you. The DU Podcast with your host, Chris Jennings.
Today I've got Jay Anglin, the Great Lakes Migration Editor for Waterfowl 360 on ducks.org. And welcome to the show, Jay.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Jay's been a regular guest this season, bringing us insights and awesome information from the Great Lakes states. There are some areas in the Great Lakes that are closed now, but Jay, what's it looking like throughout Indiana and Illinois right now?
Well, this weather's just crazy. I mean, that sounds like a broken record saying that, but after we started getting this northward push of geese, the Canada geese have just been kind of light because a lot of them never got very far south. But, we're starting to pick up some specks up here. Certainly Illinois is loaded with specks as always. There's fresh birds moving north. Of course, most of the seasons are closed. Our goose season pushes into February up here in northern Indiana. But southern Indiana, you've got, in Illinois, you've got duck season that runs towards the end of the month, depending on where you are. And it looks like, all things considered, being one of the worst duck seasons in recent memory from what everybody's saying, it looks like this last, depending on where you are, whether it's a few days or a couple of weeks, is going to be a blockbuster. A lot of birds moving north from, coming up from the south. So ducks, and geese.
Yeah, and I think the word on the street out there right now, what I'm hearing is water is about to be everywhere. And I think that's going to cover, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, even into, Pennsylvania. I mean, this is going to be a pretty significant water event over the course of the next few days, and that's going to distribute birds in places that a lot of people may not think, and hunters should be prepared for that. Am I wrong in that?
No, not in the least. And, we've had enough sheet water in these low spots. In any given field, there's always a low spot or two around here anyway, and those places have held water going back to August. You've had multiple times when they're holding water, point being 3 to 5 inches of rain forecasted from, there's like a 5 or 6 state area that basically this huge swath of real estate calling for 3 to 5 inches of rain. All those wet spots are basically, instead of soaking in, you're just going to have instant sheet water. So you're going to have an incredible amount of water on crops, stubble. And in addition to that, you're going to have a lot of big river systems that are going to blow they're going to get up into the trees. You're going to get the bottomlands are going to flood out. Of course, how important that is down there. But, you have the Wabash River, the Ohio River, the Illinois River. All these places are just going to go right up into the fields, into the woods. And so, like you said, you're going to have birds just spread out all over everywhere. So it should be really interesting.
Yeah, and you guys, one thing I've heard, I have a buddy down there or up there, I guess I should say, who hunts the Wabash. And he started doing pretty well just in the last week. And we've kind of talked about this offline, but I've been hearing, Tennessee, Kentucky, even Mississippi, Arkansas, kind of a distribution of birds that, guys are like, man, where'd they go? And, it's kind of thought these birds are pushing back north. So a lot of these, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, southern Ohio hunters, they're actually hunting that reverse migration.
Yeah, I think that's lost on a lot of guys, honestly, because when I talk to people about it, I kind of take it for granted and guys kind of give me funny looks. But, the bottom line is, yes, Wisconsin and Minnesota, southern Minnesota, but mainly Wisconsin and Michigan and southern Ontario certainly have mallards and black ducks and geese and Canada geese. But those birds probably weren't going to go any further south anyway. They're the hardiest of the hardy. So what you have is the birds that you guys or the guys down south picked up, back in November when we had that really strong cold snap, and all the birds that we expect to hit here in November just went right on past. Those birds are making that reverse migration. And, it shouldn't really be a huge surprise if you have temperatures really pushing you're ticking into the 70s in some cases down south. And with south winds and really, temps in the 40s and 50s all the way well up into the Great Lakes, Michigan and Wisconsin, for example, we have birds just cycling through here. I've seen geese flying in V's headed north, just like you would see, later in the spring, in March or late February. So, those birds are going to have a rude awakening here next week when we go Arctic again. We're going to get really cold. So you're going to have a big jam up of birds throughout these states, kind of in the mid to southern, parts of Illinois and Indiana. You're going to have a huge just mash up of birds, some headed south, some coming north. And again, I think it's just going to be a really great situation for a lot of guys that are willing to put the time in and go find them, because they will be spread out, and there's no question about that.
The Ducks Unlimited Expo, May 15th, 16th, and 17th, 2020 at the Texas Motor Speedway in Fort Worth, Texas. Interactive villages, shooting, archery, dogs, fishing, kayak, canoe, 4x4 off-road tracks, ATV, UTV track, industry experts, demonstrations, exhibitors, and more. The Ducks Unlimited Expo, everything outdoors. The ultimate playground for the outdoor enthusiast. The Ducks Unlimited Expo. Visit www.duckexpo.com.
Yeah, in your last migration alert, you alluded to, while the North Zone in Indiana is closed, North Zone in Illinois is closed or getting ready to close, and real savvy hunters should really start looking towards goose hunting, and the goose numbers have just been outstanding, even in southern areas of Indiana, I guess that would be central where Goose Pond is. You got snow geese, you've got white fronts, you've got lots of Canadas spread throughout. What are you telling people, like in your area where your ducks are closed but goose is still open? Like, hey, here's what you should be focusing on.
Well, it's funny. I got out last Friday and Saturday, had some great hunts with some friends over in the Elkhart area, and really, you have these core areas that you always have your local contingent of, say 200 to 500 geese. And really, migrants, of course, pick up on those, whether they're headed south or north. And, when they're coming back north, around here anyway, in the last 5 years, they drag along a whole bunch of specks, white fronts. And then we get a handful of snows. And all these birds just sort of like gather around these main, areas that the locals are utilizing. And then they're feeding with the locals. So, the locals are pretty wired tight. They're hitting fields that can't be hunted. They're going to parks, et cetera. But sooner or later, they sort of hit this critical mass point, and we've hit that up here. So roosts that had, say, 200 birds 10 days ago might have, you might be pushing over 1,000 birds or 2,000 birds, and they start to push out. So you really have to just go watch the birds on the roost, watch the loafs, and see what birds decide to kind of break stride and say, you know what, I'm not daisy chaining over there today. Let's go look over here. And you got to get out in front of them. And it takes work and it takes gas money and all that. So if you have a crew of 5 guys, you send 2 guys every night to go watch. And those are the guys, that are successful. And, and there's always running traffic in the really great spots too, which I do a lot. But it's been really good. And I think it's going to get really, really good here in the last few weeks of our North Zone seasons. And again, the guys down south, it's just going to be snows and white front cycling through, like freight train migration, I think, headed north here in the next 4 or 5 days for sure, it seems like.
Yeah, we're sitting here today. I'm in Memphis, and it is about 72 degrees with about an 18-mile-an-hour constant south wind. So, the snows and specks who are, they're eager to push anyway. And I've heard lots of reports throughout Illinois and Indiana that guys are picking up snow geese left and right for sure, which is bad news for our light goose conservation order. But hopefully, you kind of alluded to it. What's the next step? Hopefully this, the next time you guys technically get really cold, you're looking at about 10 days out now, but that'll bounce those birds back down here, and that's what some hunters up there need to be prepared for as well.
Yeah, I think so. And the snows are amazing, and I really think the specks actually might outfly them sometimes. But those snows will come up. There's a couple of huge concentrations in southern Illinois already. I'm hearing, I couldn't verify it in time for this, but I heard one concentration as well into the millions, in a couple counties. But those birds were probably in Arkansas 2 or 3 days ago. And when we get cold, they're going to turn around and come right back down again. And I don't think it's a big whoop to those birds at all, to cruise 200-300 miles for them in the favorable winds. It's business as usual for them. So, I think guys freak out. Wow, that's amazing. But these birds make such incredibly huge jumps during migration, up and down the flyway that anymore, 100, 200-mile push, it doesn't even really impress me much. It's really amazing.
Yeah, those birds are amazing. Well, Jay, hey, I appreciate you joining me today. This has been a very enlightening. Hope the hunters in the Great Lakes states are prepared for that water, prepared for some of that sheet water, start looking at the goose possibilities and opportunities throughout, and appreciate you providing all this insight for us, Jay.
Oh, it's always great to be on here. Look forward to the next time.
I'd like to thank Jay Anglin, the Great Lakes Migration Editor for Ducks.org, for bringing this great information to us and this awesome insight on what's going on with the birds in the Great Lakes region. I'd also like to thank Clay Baird, our producer, for bringing this content to everyone. And I'd like to thank you, the listener, for listening and supporting wetlands conservation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the DU Podcast. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show and visit www.ducks.org/DU Podcast for resources based on today's topics, as well as access to more episodes. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.